happening next week. We have a free toolkit available that includes ready-to-go social media posts, a free use image library to create your own posts and resources, as well as free events you can attend. So if you're interested in that, please sign up on our website. With that, I'll pass it over to our moderator, Adam, who is our programs intern at the Invasive Species Center.
All right, thanks, Madison. Our first speakers are Tony Bahu and Jesse Boxer. Their presentation is entitled Gaming for Good, Using a Mobile Game to Tackle Invasive Species in the Kootenays. So I'll hand it over to our first speakers.
Great, thanks a lot, Adam. And hi, everyone. I'm Tony, and I'm the CEO and founder of Crowdsource. Let me share my screen, and I'll get the presentation up there. Here we go. So I'll start first with a little bit of background on Crowdsourcer, and then I'll turn it over to Jesse to showcase our invasive species project in Kootenays. So Crowdsourcer, it's a mobile game for crowdsourcing invasive species removal. The company itself is from Finland, and we were founded in 2020. We've been operating in 7 different countries, mostly in Finland, Sweden, and now in Canada we had our first projects. We've done so far over 200 projects. We have about 200,000 registered users, and most active user group in the app is teenagers. So the app is fairly simple. We have a client, might be a city, it might be Invasive Species Society in the case of the Canadian project. And the idea is that they have some data collection or microtasks, such as removal of invasive species that they need done. And we organize a game in the app, and we pay people who participate. They verify their results by uploading photos or videos, depending on what type of mission it is. And we quality control them and pay them. And then the client gets the data to show that this data has been collected or these microtasks have been done. We started with roads and cycle lane surveys. So if you know the game Pac-Man from the 80s, it was inspired by that and Pokemon Go. So the idea was that you sprinkle these virtual fruits that are worth money on roads or cycle lanes. People collect them by recording a video. Then you feed the videos to the AI, and it analyzes the condition of roads. So it was initially a crowdsourced road condition monitoring system. We expanded to infrastructure surveys in 2022. The idea was that we can map these, for example, park benches or trash bins to a condition survey. So people were searching for these, photographing them and marking them on the map. We expanded to invasive species in 23. And the concept works so that when a person finds, let's say, a bush of lupine, which is an invasive plant in Finland, within the game area that the app shows, they first record a video and walk around the siding. So their GPS draws it on the map. We get the surface area of the siding. After that, they insert their estimate of the density of that siding. As a function of the density and the size, it will tell you how much money you will earn if you remove them. Then their task is to remove them and film an after video showing that they've done a good job. And then they upload those, we review them, and after that, we pay the users and they can request the money to their bank account from the virtual wallet in the application. We also do accessibility surveys, but I won't go further into that. This is the bright spot of using Crowdsourcer. So in Finland, typically, especially teenagers have been absent from these volunteering events for removal of invasive species. But once we publish the application, you can see from the age distribution that the top 3 user age groups are 13, 14, and 15-year-olds. So it's a great way for teenagers to earn money during the summertime if they don't have a summer job, for example. We started in 23, as I mentioned. We removed something like 300,000 squares of invasive species. We have 15 cities. in 24 million square meters, we had about 30 cities, and last year we had about 65 cities, and we removed 3 million square meters. And we also won the Finnish Biodiversity Award for 23-24 for the application. And the number of users we had participating is approximately 5,000 last summer. But yeah, that's a brief introduction to Crowdsource, and now I'll turn it over to Jessie.
Thanks, Tony. Hi, everyone. My name is Jessie Boxer. I am the engagement assistant with CICIS, the Central Kootenay Invasive Species Society. So we're located in the southern interior of British Columbia, sort of nearing the Rocky Mountains in Alberta and bordering the United States in the south. We operate around across quite a large region, and these are the unceded territories of the Ktunaxa, the Syilx, the Secwepemc, and the Sinixt First Nations. So just want to acknowledge their work and stewardship that they've been doing since time immemorial. And our projects today with Crowdsource were funded, and we're very grateful for the funding from the Habitat Conservation Trust Foundation, the Columbia Basin Trust, the Government of BC, and the Regional District of Central Kootenay. So next slide, please, Tony. They'll be switching slides for me. So this past summer, we at CICIS were looking for a new way to engage volunteers in invasive species management. So Crowdsource really appealed to us for several reasons. As mentioned by Tony, a lot of our volunteer base is getting older, and so we were interested in attracting younger audiences by having an innovative model and using an app format. And we were also really interested in the sort of microtask incentive model. So having a way to verify people's work and then channeling funder money out into the community. So that really interested us. After that, the app offers as well a great way to collect spatial data. And for us as a invasive species society, this is really important. And a lot of the plants we're working with, the community has that knowledge, and we're looking for a way to capture that in real time. Our overall goals with our projects were to empower the community to work independently on invasive species treatment and increase awareness of invasive species, especially in regards to our main target plant, which is poison hemlock. So next slide, please. So the main plant that we focused on working with Crowdsource was poison hemlock, as mentioned. So this plant is actually poisonous. It's toxic to humans and animals upon consumption. And as you can see in the left map here, it's actually very concentrated and not widely distributed in our region. So it's a high priority for us to eradicate. And this is why we focused on this plant. And then later on in this past summer, where we worked with Crowdsource, we also added on some projects with Scotch broom, which is more widely distributed in our region, but still a medium priority for us. And it's a plant we already do a lot of volunteer work with, so we were interested in seeing how the application would work with them as well. So next slide, please. So we launched this past summer 4 total missions with Crowdsource. The first one was the Poison Hemlock Patrol, which was the mechanical treatment of poison hemlock. And then we added on a straightforward reporting mission. And then we did the same thing with Scotch broom, and as well a reporting mission with Scotch broom as well. So we put out a bunch of promotion, online media, radio advertisements. We did some outreach booths to the public, different talks, and promoted as much as we could about these projects. So next slide, please. The way that it actually worked for us on the coordination side, we basically at CICIS were working with multiple jurisdictions to get permission to do treatment on land. So for example, with poison hemlock, we worked a lot with the city of Creston, where that plant was concentrated, to get permission from the municipality, the regional district, and some private landowners as well. And once permissions were attained, we handed that over to Crowdsourca, who could add it to their map and then basically open up those greened areas to the public. And then they managed the rest. Participants themselves, all they had to do was download the app, make an account, join the mission. They would read through the instructions, and then for poison hemlock in particular, we added on the step of completing a quiz because it is a dangerous plant. So once they completed that quiz with 100%, we actually provided users with PPE, so personal protective equipment, that they could go and pick up at their local hardware store. Once they had all of this, they could take their phone and the app and all their gear and go out and treat in the greened areas on the map. So next slide, please. So here's an example of the users basically go out and take before and after photos of the plant that they've treated, and Crowdsourca uses that to verify the density in the area, and then people are paid based on meters squared. So in this photo, you can see poison hemlock has the white flowers at the top. It's fairly bushy, and then in the after photo, it's no longer there. So what's great about this is it records spatial data for us at CICUS, and it allows volunteers to work independently. Next slide. Thanks. So the results of these programs, so as mentioned, we worked with 2 species across 2 different towns. Preston was poison hemlock, and Nelson, we did Scotch broom. Overall participation was on the lower end, despite us doing a fair amount of promotion. Regardless, there was still a fair amount of area treated. So the 2 participants for poison hemlock treated almost 3,000 meters squared of plant. There was no sightings reported. For Scotch broom, 4 participants cleared almost 1,000 meters squared of plants, and 17 sightings were reported. Overall, we gave out in total 488 Canadian dollars through Crowdsourca. So next slide. Thanks. So the benefits of this program, overall, despite the low participation, we actually did see a fair amount of increased awareness of poison hemlock in particular. And we saw a lot of social media engagement as well. So as you can see from this poster, we had almost 19,000 views. So people were really interested in the program. There just wasn't necessarily that uptake that we were hoping for. But regardless, awareness was one of our goals. And with the toxicity of the plant, we were really happy to see that actually getting out into the community. We also were really happy to gain more spatial data and awareness of plant distribution around Creston in particular. And then overall, we were also really happy with this program for helping us coordinate efforts with multiple stakeholders, and also putting out this project allowed us to engage private landowners as well and have them report locations of the plant on their own properties. So we saw lots of success with these things. Next slide, please. So we did have some challenges. As we saw, there was some recruitment challenges, and some of that could be attributed as well to the fact that we are in a very rural area, so we have a low population already. As well, there's a higher amount of older folks, and a lot of young folks are working in the summers. We did see some user challenges with technological barriers, such as you need to have a data plan on your phone. Use the app, you need a fully charged phone, and sometimes service can be spotty in our areas. The treatment itself, the plants we were working with were on the more challenging side. As we saw, poison hemlock does have some safety challenges as well, and it just takes a lot more logistics, so that can create some barriers for users. And we did have some challenges with disposal, where some plant material was left on site, and we just needed to clarify that being part of the process. Overall, people didn't fully understand the incentive model, as opposed to it thinking that it was like a full-time paid job. Instead, this is more of a rewards-based system. And then, within CICUS, we had a learning curve, which is expected with a pilot project. Next slide. Thanks. So going forward, we are continuing the poison hemlock patrol for this summer till the end of June 2026, which is just based on our funding. What we learned really is that you need to start as early as possible for coordination, for promotion, and as well for plant treatment as well, depending on the species. We're also hoping to add more known sites so that people can get out there much faster and get right to treating. And we're also adding more private land missions as well so that private landowners can treat on their own properties. And then clarifying some messaging about financial incentives and proper disposal steps, and then getting just as much promotion and clear promotion as possible. So yeah, we're looking forward to this summer and thank Crowdsourca for their hard work, and we're excited to see where this goes. So now we'll be doing a question period. So thanks everyone for tuning in. Yeah, I can just answer quickly that the first question I kind of said, but yeah, I would say the main barrier probably was just the logistics of treating the plant because our species were a little more challenging. We did actually see a fair amount of people actually do the quiz and pick up the PPE. They just didn't necessarily go and do the treatment. So we're hoping to increase participation by putting out more informational material as well to help identify the plant.
There's a couple of questions in the
There are a
Q&A.
couple of questions in the chat. So, sorry, Tony.
No, no worries.
The first one is, how do you propose to increase participation rates going forward?
Yeah, so as mentioned, we're trying to put out more promotional material at an earlier stage. And also, we've been looking to engage local ambassadors as well. So putting on some local presentations and finding individuals that can bring the project to either their group of friends or their community if they have like a recreational group that they're involved with. That's really going to be our way in for this season.
Okay, the next one is, you had lots of views but low signups. What did you identify as the main barrier? Quiz, PPE, pickup, safety concerns, incentives, or map permissions, and what change will you test next season to increase participation without lowering safety or misidentification risks?
Yeah, so I did answer that one quickly just at the end there. Yeah, so in my opinion, the main barrier was really just the overall logistics of going out to treat these challenging species. So just trying to put out more information and communicate with folks to help them feel confident going out. As well as I mentioned, trying to actually put really specific locations so it's really easy for people to access those.
Okay, another one are, where are the bags of debris taken and how are they further disposed of?
That's a great question. So as with most of the plant species that we treat, we want people to dispose them at their local landfill. And they are doing deep burial so that those plants don't grow again, and as well double plastic bagging so the plant material is contained.
Okay, another question is, can you expand on how private land missions are implemented?
Yeah, that's a great question. Right now we're coordinating with private landowners. So they reach out to us and they send us their address basically, and then we can add their map area into the game. And Crowdsourca is basically keeping that private. So only the landowner can see that, and then we can choose which user to actually add to that mission in particular. So it's not just visible to anybody who's part of the mission.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much to our speakers. If there are more questions, you can ask our speakers via email. And And we are going to move on to our next presentation. Our speaker is Elizabeth Grader with Ottawa Riverkeepers. Her presentation is entitled Bridging Data and Community, How Volunteer Monitoring is Strengthening Invasive Species Management in the Ottawa River Watershed.
Perfect. Thanks a lot. Do you see my screen?
Yep, I can see
Yes.
it.
Okay, great. Hi, everyone. My name is Elizabeth Grader, and like Adam said, I'm the Science Programs Coordinator at Ottawa Riverkeeper. So today I will be talking about bridging data and community, so looking at some of the community work that we do surrounding our invasive species monitoring program. But before I get started, I just want to mention that the watershed, the Ottawa River watershed, or the Kichisibi, is located on the unceded territory of the Anishinaabe, Algonquin First Nation community. And we recognize the legacy of colonialism that continues to have a profound impact on the rights of Algonquin people. And there is this urgent need for meaningful action that truly confronts this legacy. And so just a quick little about us, about Ottawa Riverkeeper. So we are an organization that's located in Ottawa, but we work on the entire Ottawa River watershed. And I'll show a map of that in a second. And so we are a non-governmental, independent organization, charity organization that works across jurisdictions. We work across provinces. We really try to collaborate with municipalities and all of the community members that are located within the watershed. And we act as a watchdog looking out for environmental problems, pollution, sources of pollution, different environmental issues that could be coming up within the watershed. And then we really try to advocate for the protection or the improvement of these environmental problems. And a lot of times we'll use science-based knowledge to back the solutions that we try to come up with around the watershed. So like I mentioned, we work in the entire Ottawa River watershed, which is this area surrounding the Ottawa River. And the Ottawa River begins at Lac des Outaouais in Quebec and runs for 1,270 kilometers before reaching Montreal at Lac du Montagne. So this watershed is quite large. It's about twice the size of New Brunswick. And so it's a lot of area for us to cover and to understand. And so the way that we do that a lot of times is through our community members that are located throughout the watershed. And when we were working within the Ottawa River watershed, we started to realize that there was really a lack of information, especially in the northern sections of the watershed, about ecological health. And so we started the Watershed Health Assessment and Monitoring Initiative, where we looked at assessing the current state of knowledge about the health of the watershed, and looking at specifically, we targeted 14 indicators of environmental health within the watershed. And over the past few years, we've been trying to understand and fill those gaps in knowledge. And one of the ways that we do that is through our community-based monitoring programs. So one of our programs is our invasive species monitoring program that I'm going to talk about today. But if you want to learn about the other variables that we look at, those 14 indicators, as well as find out a little bit of that health snapshot from the watershed, we do have this full watershed report card on our website that we published in 2024. So like I mentioned, invasive species are one of those 14 indicators. And so we began our invasive species monitoring program with a few objectives in mind. The first was to identify the data gaps. So we wanted to understand what the data look like within the watershed. So identify the data gaps regarding invasive species within the watershed. Second, we wanted to try to encourage reporting about the presence and absence of invasive species and about the potential spread of invasive species. And then third, we wanted to increase the awareness about the presence of invasive species and the impact that invasive species have on the watershed. So we really wanted to try to understand what's there, try to collect more data about the invasive species arriving, and then spread awareness about spread and the impacts of invasive species. And so our first step was to identify those data gaps within the watershed. So the first step was to collect as much data as we could find through different sources such as iNaturalist and Maps. We also had our own community-based monitoring program where volunteers went out and collected data about the presence, absence of invasive species. So that was first step, collect the data throughout the watershed, look at the data through a watershed perspective instead of just municipality by municipality. And through our program, we were targeting 15 different invasive species. So we didn't look at all of them. We focused on 15 that we had picked. And this was based on their impact to aquatic ecosystems and their presence near or in riparian zones. So we're really focused on aquatic ecosystem health. And so that's how we selected these 15 species. The first look at the data, we found that invasive species have been reported in the Ottawa River watershed for almost 100 years. So they have been present for quite a long time. We've also realized through looking at the data that reports have been increasing for the past 8 years. So does that mean that there's more invasive species more recently, or just people have been reporting them? We're not sure, but we do know that there are more reports of invasive species occurring since around 2018. So then when we put that data all together on a map, we found that a majority of the invasive species reported were observed in the southern section of the Ottawa River watershed. But we also found that there were invasive species present in all of the subwatersheds. So all of those smaller rivers that feed into the Ottawa River, we did find invasive species present in those subwatersheds. And one of the concerning things is that there is less data about invasive species in the northern section of the watershed. And that does make sense. There's less people, there's less risk of spread, but there is a lot of movement from people who live in the southern section of the watershed moving up to the northern section of the watershed. So there is a lot of potential for invasive species to be spread to the northern section of the watershed. And it is concerning because we don't have a lot of data. So there is a high risk of undetected spread of invasive species in the northern section of the watershed. So when we were looking at the data, we realized, okay, we really need to focus on trying to understand and collect more data about invasive species in the northern section of the watershed and try to spread awareness so that either we have more data, and we can also get ahead of this current spread or future spread of invasive species. So if you want to know a little bit more about what we found in this study that we did of invasive species in the Ottawa River watershed, we have a full report that we published this past summer, and you can find it on our website. So once we had this baseline understanding of what data is available within the watershed and those reports of invasive species, we decided to take it a little bit further and take a deeper look or develop a deeper understanding of the invasive species populations found within the watershed. So we started this pilot project this past summer, and the main objectives of this project, which was a mapping project of invasive species, was to validate historical observations of invasive species. So we have these reports of invasive species from many years. We want to see if those invasive species are still present. Was it just a plant that never got established, or has that invasive species gotten established in the local environment? We also wanted to look at the distribution. So how large was that patch of invasive species? Was it one plant, say one plant of purple loosestrife compared to a kilometer large of a patch of invasive species? And then within that patch, we wanted to know what was the density, how dense was this population growing. And so through this, we looked at the historical data that I had mentioned before. We selected priority areas within the Ottawa River watershed that we wanted to target. And this was based on location to fluvial systems, also looking at conservation areas. And so we selected those sites. And then with the help of community scientists, we conducted field visits looking at the presence of those historically reported invasive species. So for our protocol, we developed a really simple form using Survey 123 that we uploaded on tablets. And we sent these tablets to volunteers located throughout the watershed. So our team, we don't have the capacity to go up into the northern section, drive 6 to 8 hours into the watershed to be frequently to be able to look at these populations of invasive invasive species. And so we have community scientists that we've been working with for many years, and they were able to get trained, learn how to use the Survey 123 app, and take these tablets into the field to collect this meaningful data for us. And so when they were in the field, they looked at the presence absence of the target species. They looked at the size of the patch of the plant and the density of the patch. And in the cases of a large patch of invasive species, polygons were drawn around the perimeter of the patch to give us an idea of how large that patch of invasive species was. And then in local cases, we also went in the field and used this protocol, but we really tried to use community scientists outside of the Ottawa area. And to just have a quick look at some of our initial findings from this pilot study, we targeted 3 different areas. Some areas in South Nation. We looked at the Arnprior Pembroke area, about an hour, 2 hours north of Ottawa. And then we also had volunteers in the Timiskaming region up in the northern section of the watershed. So we had selected 46 sites that were priority sites for us based on the variables that I mentioned before. And out of those 46 sites, we found invasive species at 42 of those sites. So out of those 46 historically reported sites. And then out of those sites, we found that in 34 of the cases, there was show of invasive species spreading over the area. So it was taking over a larger section of the area, and it wasn't just, say, one plant. And we did find that, like I mentioned, a majority of the spread occurred in these historically reported areas of invasive species. And we found that there was a lot of spread in parks and along shorelines where conditions were easier for the plants to expand. And so besides the data collection portion, we also tried to take the information that we had put together, so that historical map, the historical data that we had put together, as well as the information that we had mapped, we put that together and tried to have conversations with municipalities that were located in those targeted areas. So we really wanted to strengthen that regional understanding of the invasive species present in different regions. So we did this by creating these simple two-page documents where we would select an area. So this was in the Timiskaming region. We selected the Timiskaming region. We mapped out all of the invasive species reports that had been historically reported in that area. And we put together these simple documents for a wide range of people to be able to consume and quickly understand what invasive species were present in their region. And with these documents, we went and we led knowledge sharing sessions with community members, municipalities, conservation authorities, and tried to really look through a local lens, a regional lens at this issue and have that conversation more specifically. And we had really good reception around these two-page documents. There were a lot of municipalities that were really interested to learn or even surprised to learn what invasive species were present within their municipalities. And we worked really closely with conservation authorities who don't necessarily have the capacity to go out and collect a lot of data about invasive species throughout their sub-watersheds. We were able to provide them that data, and then from there, identify priority areas for future mapping and future field work. So that was one step that we did to try to increase the understanding of what invasive species were present in these different regions throughout the watershed. And we also created this online platform for community members to learn what invasive species were located in their region, and also get trained on how to identify invasive species. So this is one of the examples. This is a site on our website. So what volunteers can do or community members can do is this map here on the left is a clickable map. So you can click on the region where you live or that you're interested to figure out what invasive species are present. You can click on the section of the map, and then it takes you in this middle image here. These are the different invasive species out of our 15 species that have been reported in that region. And then they can click on the invasive species that they're interested in, and it takes them to these short training quizzes that people can learn how to identify the invasive species and then learn how to report it in their region. So it was we tried to make it a very easy way for people to get trained on how to report and understand what invasive species were present in their region. And then we also had a variety of social media campaigns that we did this past summer to encourage people to take these quizzes to understand what was in their local environments and help to report the invasive species, especially in those northern regions where we don't have a lot of data. And so to wrap up the project, we found that the work that we've been doing for the past few years on invasive species, it provided a lot of much needed insight into invasive species around the watershed. And so now moving forward, we have that baseline of data and baseline of understanding in order to know which sections of the watershed we want to target and which areas we need more data in terms of that spread of invasive species. We are already seeing that the data that we're collecting is being used by municipalities, it's being used by conservation authorities to support management activities. And we're really happy to see that it seems like there is this need for more data around the watershed, and we have the capacity, our team and our volunteers, to help collect that data. And so looking forward, we will continue to have conversations with municipalities, with conservation authorities, to identify possible collaboration opportunities. And we also this summer, we're hoping to continue this project, recruit and train more community scientists to be able to collect more data throughout the watershed so that we can try to get more understanding and a little bit of a head start on some of this invasive species work. So with that, I will wrap up my presentation, and thank you all.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. I'll go on to the questions that are located in the chat, or the Q&A box, sorry. One of them is, what are your 14 ecological health indicators?
Yes, great question. So more information can be found on our website, but we have a variety of indicators. We look at benthic invertebrates, total phosphorus, algal blooms, urbanization, like development, ice on, ice off of aquatic systems, fish richness, mercury, invasive species, temperature. So we have a lot of different ecological indicators. And if you go to our Watershed Health Assessment and Monitoring Initiative webpage, you'll be able to explore each of those indicators.
Thank you so much. I believe that you may have partially answered the next one, which is that who exactly are these community scientists and how are they trained?
Yeah, great question. So we, through our Watershed Health Assessment and Monitoring Program, we have a variety of community-based monitoring programs. So not only our invasive species monitoring program, but we have a total phosphorus monitoring program, road salt, we have a few programs. So through these programs, we've developed quite a large group of community scientists. And through that program, we were able to reach out to a few community scientists that are located in the regions that we were trying to work on. So when we were looking at the Arnprior-Pembroke area, we knew a few community scientists who might be interested in this project because it was a little bit more hands-on than some of our others. And in the Temiskaming region as well, we had some volunteers that we've worked with for a few years. So we knew that they had this background of working with us and understanding a little bit of our protocols and things like that. So for this program, we had 3 community scientists who helped us collect the data. And again, this was our pilot study. And so we were going to be expanding it now that we've tested the project a little bit. And so with those 3 volunteers, we had tablets for them. We mailed them the tablets, and then we did an hour training with them online on how to go through how to use the form on the tablet, how to identify the invasive species in the areas that they were going to. And yes, we gave them a training, and then they would receive their tablet. They would also receive a spreadsheet, like a list of the GPS locations for the reports of invasive species in their region. So they would be able to go, and we would say, okay, there's purple loosestrife at this location. Please go verify at that location that there is purple loosestrife. If there is, then here are some follow-up questions regarding the density and the size of the patch, etc. So this was, it's about an hour training that we would give each of the volunteers so that they felt comfortable going out and collecting data on invasive species. And I will say, out of the 3 volunteers, most of them did have background knowledge about invasive species because they had participated in our general invasive species monitoring program in the past.
Thank you so much. One last question is, can you post a link to the 2-page overviews of invasive species by sub-watershed?
Yeah, those are documents that we haven't actually published publicly. We've been working with the municipalities. But we do, so we have a website, Ottawa Riverkeeper Data Portal, and all of the documents that we create, like our invasive species report and other documents, they're located there on that website. And I will see if those can be published. I think that we'll be able to publish them publicly. For the moment, we don't have them published publicly. But if you are interested in looking at the documents that we have regarding our invasive species program, you can find them on that data portal.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth, for answering those questions, and thank you for being a speaker. We'll move on to our next presenter, Mackenzie Moxley from the Ontario Federation of Anglers and Hunters. Mackenzie's presentation is entitled Educating the Next Generation, Classroom Outreach to Prevent the Spread of Aquatic Invasive Species in Ontario. So I'll hand it over to Mackenzie now.
Hi, thank you so much, Adam. I should be sharing if that's working presently. And
Yep, that works.
Great. Hi, everybody. My name is Mackenzie Moxley. I am, like Adam said, from the Ontario Federation of Anglers and Hunters Foundation. My presentation is on educating the next generation, utilizing classroom outreach to, in the future, prevent the spread of aquatic invasive species in Ontario. Just a little background on me. I have a bachelor's in science in ecology and evolutionary bio from the University of Toronto. I have an environmental monitoring background through conservation authority work and volunteering. Presently, I'm working with the Ontario Federation of Anglers and Hunters Foundation as a project specialist, and my project, my big focus right now, is classroom programming. So first, I'll give you a little bit of background on our program. So I work with the Ontario Federation of Anglers and Hunters out of their conservation program, the Invading Species Awareness Program. Give you some background on that, outreach and education, talk about that classroom programming in particular, and then look at our results and the feedback we've received. So my program I work with is the Ontario's Invading Species Awareness Program. So it's a 34-year partnership between the OFH Foundation and the Ministry of Natural Resources. We have a lot of different focuses on different ways that we try and spread awareness about invading species and also ways that we work to prevent their future spread. Different things like monitoring and tracking. We have community science, things like our invasive species hotline, EDMAPs. We are reviewers for EDMAPs for all Ontario reports, different ways of science-based, community science-based tracking of invasives to establish known distributions and hopefully prevent future spread using that information. We also do different things like eDNA monitoring for things like water soldier and marbled crayfish. We facilitate control and response efforts, things like the water soldier working group. We are also in the marbled crayfish working group. We have representatives, we have representatives in that working group. We also have different surveillance and removal programs, such as our wild pigs surveillance program and the mystery snail and management and removal program. Lastly, our big focus that I'm talking about today is generating education and awareness through both digital and in-person outreach. So looking at our outreach and education side, we focus on key pathways for introduction and spread through social media posts focused on specific pathways in both the Invading Species Awareness Program social media and the OFH Foundation social media, and also physical outreach materials. We produce different things focusing on different invasive species, basically key identifying features for some things like crayfish, and also pathways of spread for things like our Clean Drain Dry programming that focuses on specifically boats and understanding the laws in the Invasive Species Act surrounding movement of things like trailers and cleaning and all that. We also engage the public through outreach events. We go to trade shows such as the Toronto Sportsman Show and other general shows and derbies like the Owen Sound Salmon Spectacular. We also go to different gardening and angling events and dock outreach. We'll go to anything from something like our garden markets to Cottage Association annual general meetings, just talking about invasive species, spreading that awareness with things like specimens and physical outreach materials. But our big focus for today in the Invading Species Awareness Program is classroom programming. So we use classroom programming to provide outreach to Ontario's youth. And we're very lucky to be able to provide this program for free. So this is an awesome part of the Invading Species Awareness Program. I'm kind of biased because it's a part of most of what I do, but I really love this program. We've been able to reach over 10,000 students from 2022 to 2026 alone. So this presentation is kind of showing the way that we got started, the way we implement, and hopefully it is replicable to produce in other areas because it's a really great means of outreach. Our presentations in particular focus on invasive carp and high priority aquatic invasives, but this format can be used for most, pretty much anything general invasive species information. But we specifically focus on that due to our partnership. We receive funding from the Department of Fisheries and Oceans to produce this programming. It is very invasive carp focused, but we also use this programming to discuss other invasive species and provide information to students on these key pathways that they spread. So that funding is a big part of being able to do this programming. There are many grants that support action towards environmental education provided provincially and federally. It depends on what you have access to, really. That funding is used for a lot of different things I'll talk about in a bit. So this allows us to offer the programming for free. Depending on the funding you receive, that might not always be viable, but if you can provide it for free, that's always a big bonus to teachers. We also, a big part of getting started is contacting educators, reaching out to school boards, creating physical flyers if you're focusing local areas. Like, for example, a lot of what we'll do is focus on our target areas. We are focusing on invasive carp outreach to help hopefully future anglers be able to identify invasive carp. So we focus on the Great Lakes area, but also we'll do presentations locally to anglers around our kind of area in Peterborough, well, young anglers in classrooms. And then locating guest speakers, having well-informed, passionate presenters is always a big plus. For example, I found that my strong background in environmental work helps contextualize a lot of the information. Kids have a lot of different questions. They won't just ask you about invasive species, but if you're able to have that background to kind of redirect and provide context, for example, kids will be like, well, how do we know what's where? And I have that aquatic monitoring assistant background from conservation authorities where I can say, well, we do things like electrofishing and seine netting. So having that context can really boost these presentations and provide that information in a way that students understand. So creating programming, curriculum review, understanding your provincial, territorial, or wherever you're out of curriculum is a huge draw for teachers. We use that, we say we're free, and we're curriculum based, and that is usually enough for most teachers to be pretty interested. For example, we will discuss biodiversity, which is a big part of our grade 4 and grade 6. Well, grade 4 is mostly like food chain focus. It starts with the biodiversity. Grade 6 has biodiversity as a big part of that science unit. So we talk about biodiversity and how invasive species threaten it. So incorporating that is a really big bonus for teachers. We have specimens and models. Our models are very nice. They show up in some of these slides. They're very accurate invasive carp molds. We also have things like a sea lamprey from the Great Lakes Fisheries Commission. So some of these are procured by our own group, basically because we have different surveying efforts, things like crayfish monitoring. We have different licenses, scientific licenses to collect, which allows us to collect some models, but also some are donated. But those are really big boosts to things like tactile learning. And then creating programming, obviously creating presentations and activities. We create presentations with clear visuals followed by engaging activities, creating activities such as things like Jeopardy, where students will recognize the format, but then it will allow them, since they already know the format, they can focus on the information being provided. It also creates good review for these students. Since I don't have a specific background in education, a big challenge has been creating and updating these. I use teacher feedback, feedback from educators in our organization. So really understanding the limitations of your knowledge, because I have that bio knowledge. I don't necessarily have that like background in education. So that's a big challenge for me, but collaborating with the people in your program, company, wherever you are. Implementing, Creating contacts is a big part of this as well. I mentioned reaching school boards and other education-related contacts. School boards is a big way I reach out. I send emails. They'll usually have media distribution rules around them. So reaching those school boards to be able to reach a wide audience without necessarily having to email each individual teacher yourself is a really good way. It's also just a good way to get a bundle, like a group and an understanding of that area. For example, we were able to contact the Renfrew District School Board and actually go in person from Peterborough and stay over in Renfrew to reach a whole big group of people around that Ottawa River, which is connected to our area that we're focused on in the Great Lakes. Getting there, so that's a big part of understanding the limitations of your funding and what you're doing: travel costs, employee hours, and specimen transportation. We have our specimens in plastic jars so they can be handled, but certain specimens, depending on what you have, understanding what it's going to take to contain, to procure and keep those specimens safe, understanding the travel costs. Are you looking at going local? Are you looking at targeting a specific area for your species of concern if you have one? A big challenge is choosing presentations. Well, a big challenge for us, since they're free, is choosing where to go. Because we do have, at this point in the program, a lot of interest in these sessions, we really try and focus in and understand where are we looking at focusing, where have we been, where do we want to go? And then delivery, coordinating schedules, that is a big part of implementation, understanding where are you going to be going? How are you going to get there? Technology is a bit of a factor there, but usually most classrooms are well equipped now. Our virtual classroom, we also have an accessible version that's accessed just online through our website. It allows for accessible engagement when we cannot attend virtually or in person, because our sessions are also virtual, but sometimes it just doesn't work out. It's also just great review for teachers. It is hosted through Google Slides, which reduces the cost. I also made a lot of our activities for this virtual classroom in Google Slides. It has videos, recorded versions of the presentation. They're shortened videos, so they retain viewer retention better than if you're just having a very long presentation. It's easier to keep the attention when you're there, actually like moving around and engaging. But I find with the virtual ones, to create that retention, shortening them was helpful. And then resources, digital versions of our activities engage students. We have printable resources for teachers. So we have a section for students, a section for educators. Students then pick what grade they're in. And then within that, we have different kind of avenues for them to go. There's invasive exploration, which is just pick an invasive that you want to learn about. And I have different sheets and pictures. And then our activities, all made, well, mostly made by us or made with permission or used with permission. Like I'll make things like word searches. There's a ton of resources for teachers online, and I'll usually kind of borrow some things like word searches that are free to use. Make your own word search, make your own crosswords. Anything that is a familiar format I find is really helpful, because then students are already used to a word search, they're used to a crossword, and now there's invasive species. So it's that familiar format to students with that new information that really helps that connection work. Same thing with the curriculums, understanding your curriculums. Like I understand at what point have they already learned about what a species is? At what point have they learned about what a food chain is? So understanding the curriculum really helps you understand what these students should already know and how you can use that to build off of that knowledge and help them relate to what you're talking about. Our results. So like I said, we've reached over 10,000 students from 2022 to present. Our program has presented to 25 of Ontario school boards since 2022. We've presented to varied groups. We've presented to Girl Guides, daycares, summer camps. It's once you create these presentations and activities, there's been a lot of interest from a lot of different avenues of different groups that teach children, different libraries that want us to come present. And it's always really great to have these presentations, these activities that can transfer between different, for different formats, I guess, of childhood education. So these are our reach maps. So I have mapped out All of the green is online presentations, the blue is in person. This isn't only individual. Sometimes we've been to these schools multiple times, but it presents where we have been in Ontario by year. It shows how we try to target communities around the Great Lakes area when possible, while still reaching local schools. Since we're in Peterborough, we try to still reach these local schools. It reduces costs while also reaching out to the local community. A lot of students in our community are familiar with angling, they're familiar with the outdoors. So teaching those students how to be responsible while moving through nature is a big part of what we try and do. But you can also see us sneaking all around the Great Lakes, trying to spread that awareness for invasive carps. And those high priority aquatic invasives. I talk about identification and the different pathways they can travel. So hopefully what we're trying to do is foster a more well-informed public that can apply the information we're giving them as they grow up. We have some schools we go to every year do full school-wide presentations, and the kids are still usually excited when we go back, and then as they advance the grades, they'll get our different presentations. And then our feedback, we have a feedback form. This is what I mentioned where I really, the teachers receive our presentations very well. It's free, it's curriculum focused. So I often discuss with them after. I say, what would you have us do better? A big feedback we get is usually, one thing I didn't realize to prioritize is movement breaks. I would do that for the younger students, but now it's a very big push in even the older grades. So just doing that made our presentations flow smoother, allowed the students to retain more information, which is something I didn't realize was a thing. I haven't been in school for like in high school and elementary school for a good while. So understanding those changes with time was kind of a challenge. So we created a Google feedback form. 100% of teachers, both last school year and this school year, agreed they would recommend this program to a teacher or rebook. We have a comment section. This is an anonymous form that allows teachers to give us our feedback. And we have, you can see on the screen, me and my coworker Caitlin both do the presentations right now, and we have received very good feedback, which is always encouraging. But even the constructive feedback is a big help to us because it allows us to just continue improving the program, continue improving our means of outreach. And it's a very collaborative process with us and Ontario's educators that just at the end of the day, hopefully creates a more educated next generation on things like high priority aquatic invasives and invasive carp. And that is it from me.
Thank you so much, Mackenzie. That was a great presentation. There's a couple of questions for you. One of them is, are the classroom programs available to the public to download and edit to use in their area? I would love to implement these activities in my area. And if I don't have to reinvent the wheel, that would be phenomenal.
Not all of them are publicly available right now. But if anyone reaches out to me, I'll generally just send them out. Our virtual classroom is fully available. Whenever somebody reaches out to me asking about our format, our presentations, I'm always willing to send it to them and send that information. We have our presentations kind of segmented by grade. So we have a 1 to 3, a 4 to 5, a 6 to 8, and then a high school presentation. As of now, there's not anywhere we have them publicly posted, but I think that's a good idea. And I would definitely discuss that. Our activities are also not publicly posted anywhere, but I send them out whenever requested. So I'll pass that on. I think that's a good idea.
Okay, the next one is, how do you evaluate your curriculum and program?
Yeah, so that's another good question. I actually took on this position in late 2023. So what I did is I had a bunch of presentations that had curriculum focuses, but since there was a somewhat new science and technology curriculum, I wanted to make sure we updated that. So what I do is I have a file with all of the Ontario curriculums downloaded. I go to the Ontario, like our curriculums are very accessible. So I would just read through each grade science and technology, see where we have already covered, see where we haven't covered in things like both our presentations and our activities. And I would just use that. For example, in grade 4, they cover food chains, where I can look at it and go, okay, we have a food chain there. What do they need to know about food chains? What terms do they need to know? For example, in I believe it's grade 7, they'll learn the terms biotic and abiotic. So once we have in our 6 to 8, I mentioned those terms, and even though it is a grade 7 term, the grade 6s at least will be able to get that information. So yeah, we just evaluate by looking at the curriculum and then presenting to teachers and seeing how well that's received and understanding basically the curriculum that we're working off of.
Okay, and how many, the next one is, how many staff do you have running the school program?
Yeah, so as of now, there's both Caitlin and I, my coworker, that run these programs right now. We work with our supervisor to basically what we'll do is we'll do like check-ins when we leave, but we are the ones managing that calendar. We are the ones reaching out to teachers. We are the ones emailing school boards. In my first year in this position, I was the only one doing the classroom programming. So it was a lot of running around, a lot of learning how to manage a schedule. But as of now, there's 2 of us, which makes it a lot easier, a lot smoother. But yeah, at first it was just me, and now there's 2. So we've doubled.
Thank you so much. Just one last question there is a comment and question. Love what you're doing, Mackenzie. Could you drop your email? I'd like to get in touch.
Yeah, for sure. I can put it in the chat if that's easiest. It'll just be my work email, so it'll go right to me. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you for the work you do and for the presentation. We're going to move on to our next presenter. Our next presenter is Doug Jensen from the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources. His presentation is entitled A Compelling Story of Success in AIS Prevention. So I'll hand it over to Doug now.
Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I am unable to share because the previous presentation is still being shared.
Sorry about that. Let me stop.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, okay.
Great. Well, thank you, everybody, for joining here today. I'll have to apologize. My Wi-Fi is very wonky today. I've already dropped off like 6 times this morning. So my name is Doug Jensen. I'm with the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources located in Duluth, Minnesota. And I'm also the chair for the Great Lakes Panels Outreach Coordination Committee, representing all the organizations from Minnesota to New York, also Ontario and Quebec. So again, thanks for inviting me to speak with you today. It'll be my pleasure to tell you about a compelling story, how we're building towards success in AIS prevention here in Minnesota. So for those that may not know me or my work, I've been developing conservation programs and campaigns concerning aquatic invasive species, or AIS, for over 30 years. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the highlights of that research, plus some of the recent findings based on the research of others. So through all this, what we've learned is that aquatic invasive species management is all about people management, public awareness, and proactive behaviors. And we've been hearing today through the various presentations, they're all keys to preventing the spread of aquatic invasive species. And as you may know or have heard, and ask any state in which has led AIS outreach and assessment, Minnesota has been a recognized leader in AIS research, education, outreach, and assessment for over 3 decades. And through these assessments, we've learned a great deal about how to tailor and improve AIS outreach aimed at prevention. So the purpose of this presentation, here's our agenda. So first of all, we're going to cover what has and what is being done. We're going to demonstrate the effectiveness of AIS public outreach that can change behaviors, show evidence of successful AIS management is curbing the spread here in Minnesota. And I'm not sure we'll have much time for Q&A, but I'll be hanging around through the entire conference here, and so you can draw me a question in the chat. So what has and what is being done with regard to aquatic invasive species prevention in Minnesota? Well, what we know for sure is that research shows that people pose the greatest risk for threats for overland transport. We also know that based on research that I've led or have been a part of, that people will take action if they know what to do, and without proper information, they'll likely do nothing. So we recognize that if we do nothing, that the spread is inevitable. So historically, for over a course of 2 years, a national committee of the Federal Aquatic Nuisance Species Task Force here in the United States, which I was an active member of, designed a national campaign that was launched in 2002. The Stop Aquatic Hitchhikers campaign was then launched in 2002, and then we used that campaign to launch the first comprehensive AIS campaign in the Great Lakes. But before we get into that, let's for a few moments cover what's led up to the development and launch of the national campaign. So through previous multi-state surveys of boaters and anglers that I led in 1994, 2000, and 2005, 2007, they included Minnesota boaters and anglers. The first two surveys were mail surveys in 1994 and 2000, and the 2006-2007 survey was a face-to-face survey that was delivered at water accesses. So we have long-term longitudinal data for boaters and anglers for over a decade in Minnesota. I'll show some of the results of these research projects in a few minutes. So now that I've set the stage, back in 2010, I led on behalf of the Great Lakes the first comprehensive AIS campaign, which developed over 143 tools to help get out the word about aquatic invasive species. Outreach and communications created over 33 million impressions or exposures with our prevention messages. So as a part of the first regional campaign, we conducted the first regional survey of North America Fishing Club members that was conducted in 2012 in collaboration with the North American Media Group and Wildlife Forever. So for clarity, we now have a total of 4 multi-state surveys for Minnesota boaters and anglers. And for the 2012 survey, our objectives were simple. Strategic messaging, we used strategic messaging using dedicated e-marketing that could effectively reach those anglers. We wanted to raise awareness, and we also wanted to measure whether or not the communications that we delivered resulted in behavior change. So after we exposed the recipients to 4 e-newsletters with prevention message showing the who, the what, the where, the why, and the hows to prevent the aquatic invasive species, what we wanted to do then is to show some of the results that we have asked on the importance of taking action to prevent the spread of aquatic invasive species at water accesses. And results shown here are the importance for all of the Great Lakes states, including states from Minnesota to New York. And they were remarkably consistent. So we combined all the data, and it shows here that 97% thought that aquatic invasive species were very important to moderately important. To determine awareness, we asked a before and after exposure question based on the exposure to the 4 newsletters. We asked the $1 million question: what actions did you take, and what actions will you take in the future? Always to usually taking action rose from 64% to 97%, which represents a 33% increase. Moving on to the results of the survey that I helped with again in 2013, we teamed up with the White Iron Chain of Lakes Association, which is located just north of Duluth and south of Ely, Minnesota. And they led a 30-month watershed outreach effort and conducted a mail survey of residents on aquatic invasive species. Their survey was designed so that we had comparable data at 2 watershed scales, one for the Waikulla and then one for the Great Lakes Angler Survey that we just discussed. So now let's compare the results. So over there on the left is the ranking, which is somewhat subjective in terms of very high, medium, and low in terms of actions taken. We have the actions taken, and then we have the comparison on the right, in the right column, which is the Cushway Watershed Protection Plan project that Waikulla led versus the Great Lakes Angler Survey. So you can see here that the most actions taken were draining water, also inspecting and removal of aquatic plants, was pretty consistent in terms of disposing bait. This is an area that we definitely can do better. I also note that in Ontario, surveys conducted there also showed very similar results. Need to dry everything for at least 5 days, and the differences here between rinsing and washing watercraft is because there's not as much infrastructure for doing so in the Quishway watershed versus the entire Great Lakes region. So yet another fifth survey also showed increases in awareness. Part of that Great Lakes Sea Grant Network campaign that I mentioned earlier, myself and my Sea Grant colleagues conducted post-event evaluations to measure changes in awareness and behaviors. So we have more evidence besides the email, the face-to-face survey, and online, and now post-event surveys that support that direct extension-based outreach via meetings and presentations can positively impact awareness and behavior change. So based on the outreach that we conducted at 11 events, post-events surveys showed that when combining very well and moderately aware, overall awareness went from 68% before events to 82% post-events, which represents a 26% increase, which is statistically significant. For behaviors, when combining always and very often, overall actions increased from 53% taking action to 92% always to very often taking action in the future, which represents a 39% increase, which also is statistically significant. So based on these years of data and various types of survey instruments, I became convinced that boaters will take appropriate action to prevent the spread of aquatic invasive species, and our challenge is to definitely keep the messages out in front of them and to refresh those messages and keep them current. So let's step away for a second from the survey results and take a look at Minnesota from a broader context and visit some of the whys and hows we've been observing these results and trends. And the first one is based on leadership. Nationally, Minnesota has led the first comprehensive program in the early 90s. The focus has been on policy, public outreach, watercraft inspection, and recently decontamination, also enforcement, early detection, and risk assessment. Minnesota outreach shifted early and to a more strategic and consistent and simple messaging based on community-based social marketing. And today we're the only state in the nation that provides local AIS prevention aid funding that creates a statewide network for local AIS prevention programs. So we have programs in 83 of our 87 counties. So turning back to outreach, the second is combining outreach with the evaluation. So this is a graph that represents the outcomes of all the surveys that we've discussed so far. Looking about the trend in the data, I've collected and compared that shows that Minnesota boaters and anglers are not only observing a high increase in awareness on AIS prevention, but we've observed a consistent increase by 97% in reported behavior change, and that's an increase of 27% since 1994. So again, our challenge is to keep the Stop Aquatic Hitchhikers Clean, Drain, Dry prevention message relevant here in Minnesota and beyond. Third is because we have data and research. First, we know that prevention is much more cost-effective than management. And to this end, we have further evidence that AIS prevention is working in Minnesota. Since 2015, watercraft inspection data indicate that most people, 95% or more, are following AIS prevention laws. It's the highest nationally. 3 analysis by the Minnesota Aquatic Invasive Species Research Center, or MASERC, and another by Cass County program indicate the rate of AIS spread has slowed in Minnesota over the last decade, and we're the only state that can claim that the rate of spread has slowed. It's also important to keep in perspective that Minnesota represents a perfect storm for the spread of aquatic invasive species. We have 822,000 plus registered boaters. We're the 3rd in the nation behind California and Florida. Michigan and Wisconsin is just behind us. We have 1.4 million licensed anglers. We have 33 million tourists, and 36% of them fish. We have 11,842 lakes, over 10 acres, and 8,100 fishable rivers. And we have a bunch of public accesses, over 2,200 public accesses, and also thousands of private accesses. So at this intersection of resources and risks, Minnesota should really be the perfect storm for the spread of aquatic invasive species, but that hasn't happened. But it has slowed. So why has this? Well, since 2015, boater awareness, reported compliance, and actual compliance has been over 95%. over the course of the 10 years. And many of the counties have AIS programs that are reporting 98 to 99% compliance. So this is making a difference. And nationally, again, we're the first and only state that can claim that we're curbing the spread of AIS. So now let's turn our attention to 4 recent studies, 3 by MASERC and another one by Cass County program, that provide further evidence that we're curbing the spread in Minnesota. So the first one was done by Dr. Alex Badges. By the way, these studies are publicly available as fact sheets on the MASERC website. So the question 1 that he asked, have these investments paid off? Well, evidence suggests that they have. The graphs shown here track the number of new confirmed evasions each year for 10 AIS species listed by the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources from 1985 to 2024, which are shown as the grade lines. The purple arrows indicate the pre-2015 trends, while the green arrows show the post-2015 trends. So overall, these graphs show that the rate of new AIS invasions has declined significantly since 2015. For brittle naiad, zebra mussel, and Eurasian water milfoil, 3 high-priority AIS all showed significantly lower rates of new invasions since 2015. And starry stonewort, which is the only species with an increased rate of new infestations since 2015, but it was detected for the first time in the state in 2015. So we might reasonably expect that species spread is to lag behind. So again, these results show that since the AIS prevention aids started in 2014, the rates of new invasions by key invasive species and overall new invasions have remained steady or declined, underscoring the value of continued AIS prevention. But of course, prevention only matters if there's still harm to prevent. The second question asked by Dr. Badges was the second question. In Minnesota, is Minnesota anywhere near saturated with aquatic invasive species? Minnesota would be considered fully saturated with AIS if every invadable lake was infested with every AIS. So thankfully, Minnesota appears to be far from the worst case scenario. The graph shows here that the state's AIS saturation level over time from 1985 to 2024 under various assumptions. So how many lakes are suitable for AIS invasion on average? Is it 10%, 30%, 50%, 70%, 90%? Well, it's likely it's the middle 3 values being the most plausible. What fraction of the invasions that have happened have we detected so far? Is it 100%, 50%, or 20%? So under 11 of these 15 combinations of assumptions, it turns out that Minnesota is under 10% saturated with aquatic invasive species, and in 14 of 15, it's less than 25% saturated. So this suggests that the most potential invasions haven't happened yet. AIS prevention remains critical to prevent substantial additional damage to our lake communities. So we know the rates of new AIS infestations have been declining, and we know the potential harm of AIS remains great. But Dr. Badges asked a third question. How many infestations did our AIS prevention efforts prevent so far? So we don't have to go into all the details, and modeling is not my area of expertise. So we'll just look at the results based on 250 simulation model runs for each species, plus a combination of conditions he used based on a default and no interventions. So what Dr. Badges and his team found for Z mussels with no interventions removed, the model suggests 70 more new infestations on average would have occurred, and a 20% increase over the actual number. For starry stonewort without interventions, the model suggests about 15 more new infestations would have, on average, would have been occurred, which is a 33% increase. Although we can't exactly know how many AIS invasions were prevented, simulation modeling strongly suggests that Minnesota prevention efforts over the last decade have prevented many new infestations, thus protecting Minnesota's lakes communities. In the second assessment, Dr. Kinsley calculated the reproductive number, or R, which can be used to measure how many people, on average, one individual could spread aquatic invasive species. If the R is greater than 1, the invasive species is spreading, and each infestation lake infested lake contributes to more than one infestation. If R is equal to 1, the spread is stable, with each infested lake leading to roughly 1 new infestation. If the R is less than 1, the spread is declining, indicating that prevention and management efforts may successfully limit new infestations. To Dr. Kinsley's team, analysis showed that there's a marked decline in the rate of spread following the introduction of AIS prevention aid, underscoring the importance of sustained prevention and local level efforts in invasive species prevention management successes. So before the funding went into effect in 2014, the rate of new infestations was rising. However, after the program's initiation, the rate dropped, and in recent years, R has fallen below the critical threshold of R level of 1. While new infestations still occur, the pace at which the spread has slowed. So Dr. Kinsley asked a third question: has local AIS prevention spread slowed? AIS prevention aid slowed the spread of AIS? And remarkably, these results are consistent when considering species-specific infestations, including zebra mussels that are shown on the left, and also Eurasian water milfoil on the right. A third assessment was done led by Dr. Jake Walsh, who asked the question, have we flattened the curve of infestations in Minnesota? The top panel shows the new infestations for all AIS in Minnesota, which are shown by the blue points. And the bottom panel shows the derivative, for example, acceleration or the change of the rate of new infestations over time. And the vertical line through 2015 shows how these changes are occurred with the implementation of the local AIS prevention aids used to establish and maintain county AIS prevention programs. So fourth, then the final analysis was conducted by Steve Henry, Cass County AIS program, which is located here in northern Minnesota. Basically, he took the 2025 Minnesota DNR's infested waters list, stripped out infested waters data for those connected to other water bodies to provide an analysis look through a prevention lens. He found very similar results to those of the 3 Mazurk studies. That is, the rate of AIS spread in Minnesota has slowed since 2015, when the $10 million to local AIS prevention aid funding, it's definitely shown a sound investment for the development of these programs across the state. So why has the prevention been successful? Well, overall successes have been based on effective statewide and local partnerships by DNR, counties, Mazurk, federal agencies, tribes, lake associations, advocacy groups, and people who enjoy Minnesota waters. It just shows that Minnesotans really love our lakes. So in closing, 4 elements have contributed to the prevention successes here in Minnesota, including leadership, a comprehensive plan and program, a refocus on prevention outreach, and data and research. And again, recapping the outreach from 1994 to 2007, recreational boaters and angler surveys revealed that the awareness and reported prevention actions increased from 70 to 97%, which represents a 27% increase. And since 2015, I see that things aren't advancing here for me. There we go. Isn't technology great? Since 2015, DNR watercraft inspectors observed greater than 95% statewide compliance at water access, and many county programs have repeatedly observed 98 to 99% compliance, and only 9% of Minnesota water bodies are listed and infested with AIS, and over the past 10 years, the rate of spread has dramatically slowed. So statewide and local collaborations have been key in terms of the partnerships. And in conclusion, we have now social science and along with epidemiological data collected over the past 30 years that reveals a compelling story that AIS prevention is possible using Minnesota as a case study.
Thank you so much, Doug, for that.
Yep.
In the keep us on schedule. If there's any questions, there's the email right there. You can contact Doug directly. We'll move directly into our next speaker here. We have Sita Singh, and with the Jackson County Conservation District. Her presentation is entitled Fellowship of the Fields, Creating Partnership to Address Invasive Species Needs. And I'll hand it over to our next speaker, Sheikha.
All right, thank you so much for having me here. Just to kind of reintroduce myself, my name is Shika Singh, and I am excited to give this talk. It's a little bit different. So here's a roadmap of what we'll be covering. I want to introduce who we are, and it kind of sets the stage for why someone like me is giving this talk, why it's important to build some of these partnerships, how to build and maintain, and then most importantly, tips for approaching organizations for invasive species collaboration. So we are a project that is housed in the Jackson County Conservation District. And so we are based in Michigan. And while I am a staff member of the Jackson Conservation District, I do service Jackson, Lenawee, and Washtenaw counties. So I do 3 counties. Our organization does a ton of outreach, a ton of surveys and management. We do consulting, site visits. So we do a little bit of everything. And there is someone like me who covers, all of the counties in the state of Michigan. And these CISMAs, the Cooperative Invasive Species Management Areas, are also akin to PRISMs and other weed management areas as well in different parts of the country, and I think even in Canada. And, building partnerships are really important. And I think some of the information that I'll be presenting here, it seems intuitive. And I think when you see these things, you'll be like, oh yeah, we do this, we do this. But sometimes it's easy to see it on paper, but difficult to actually remember to put in practice. And so to kind of also help new folks who are joining and maybe who are not familiar with working with partnerships groups. Maybe you're a new graduate, a new staff member. So hopefully this will help ease you into some of these partnership roles. And so kind of one of the first things that we say is, you need to identify those with common interests. And, you are going to be doing your research. We often use a snowball approach because it kind of helps us identify groups that may not be historically invited or are present in some of these partnerships. And by snowball, I mean, you talk to someone and they recommend another person, and then that person may recommend somebody else or 3 other people. And so then you build momentum. And also, one of the tricks with building partnerships is that when you do contact people, I think it's really important to remember that their schedules may not be in tune with yours. And so, for example, we work with a lot of farmers. And so during certain times of the years, and a lot of these municipal officials, like they're doing double duty. So they're the city manager, or they are, the treasurer, but they're also a full-time farmer. And then we work with tribes, and they may meet, every couple of months. So the scheduling part can be a little bit tricky, and I think we need to be respectful of those who we're trying to build these partnerships with. And then finally, it's important to be clear on why you want this partnership. Is it a planning based? Is it something that's project specific? Or is it just even like a brainstorming or just to inform needs? Like all of those are really different needs of a partnership, and you can have multiple of those aspects coming together. And then clarity of participation. I think this is really important. And quite often we get, questions about funding, because who's going to organize this? Where is the money to kickstart this effort? What are people's roles and responsibilities? Is there a reimbursement involved for people to continue? So I think the clarity of participation can be important, and being upfront about, who is doing what and what kind of funding is in place to sustain this effort. And then also to kind of keep a steady momentum, whether it's partnership meetings, in the field work, and so on. Transparency has also been important to us as well. Like, so you should say why you're interested, what your goals and objectives are. And this is actually really helpful if you have a strategic management plan. And I think this is something that a lot of organizations, especially like some small friends of groups, maybe you are, a small nonprofit and you're just getting started. So having a strategic management plan that has all your goals and decision-making processes outlined in a document that's accessible could really, help secure funding. It could also help increase partnership because everything is clear and there's something that you can refer back to. And then also, quite often we work on environmental issues, and that's the first and foremost most thing that we want to do. However, the environmental work that we do, it can't just be in a vacuum. And so I think it's important to also kind of consider the economic and social aspects of what you're wanting and how the environmental piece fits into that. Because as you can see, these environmental challenges, they do have the power to deny the equality of opportunity and hold back the progress of communities. And so that's kind of like a powerful quote when I was in DC earlier. And we really want to kind of look at things from a holistic perspective. And quite often, like historically, when we build partnerships, they have been pretty uniform. And when I mean by uniform, it's like the same people, the same, 3 or 4 organizations working together. There may not be a lot of differences and perspectives. And so everything has been, pretty uniform. And then there have been also times where, you're doing a project and it requires like, hey, maybe you need some outside perspectives. And quite often people be like, oh, we should ask maybe so and so. And then there's like some token tangent appearance. And the second kind of graphic, what I have it a little bit different than the third one, is that sometimes people like invite people just to be like, hey, we just want to check a box, have this participation. But there really is no opportunity for that group or that person to really make a meaningful, or they're not invited to really make a meaningful appearance. Whereas in the third one, that I'm trying to show that, yeah, they are part of the group. And ideally, I think it's good to have a diverse partnership because then you benefit from different insights, historical context, experience, know-how, technical, financial expertise. And so I think something that we should be really striving for is a really strong and diverse partnership, but recognizing that that can be difficult because sometimes the group that you want to work with, like their capacity is not as high. There may not be a number of organizations that fit that need. And sometimes there are also, unfortunately, historical experiences that may taint, their effort or willingness to kind of participate again. So trying to navigate some of those issues, I think, is key. So now that you've found your partners, how exactly do you keep them? I think it's important to, have opportunities where they are continually providing input and having clear and transparent communication. I think it's really important to, make sure that everyone's on the same page. And it's okay to revisit goals and adjust them to see if you're still on track, is it still feasible, have needs changed? And so that's where communication, I think, is important, and making sure people are communicated with from the beginning. And then another aspect is participation. Like you want to make this a two-way participation, but also recognizing that sometimes folks, they need to be passive because they don't have the capacity. They just want to be at the table, but they may not actually want to participate at this time. It may change later, but I recognize that there are different, needs and ability. Being adaptable when possible, directly or indirectly addressing partner needs. And the more you're able to communicate and address those needs, like the more willingness the partner may have. And when you are looking and applying for grants to maintain some of these activities, it's important to be upfront with match. So what kind of match are you getting? Being, quick to get that paperwork in. And then finally in this section, it's really important to like how you assign credit and logo, because a lot of these, organizations, they want to help, but I think it goes a long way to say, hey, we've had a lot of help from this partner, showing gratitude throughout, not just at the end or the beginning, and actually using like good quality materials for acknowledgement. And a lot of these partnerships, they could include participation opportunities and being mindful that we're inclusive of what we're doing. Equality is one thing, everybody's allowed to participate, but trying to go through and make it so that everybody actually can participate is important. Some of the challenges, and I kind of alluded to some of them, like limited capacity. the funding may not be there. You may only have one person, juggling multiple tasks. And then even, for a partnership group, we know sometimes we require, informal letters or memorandum of understanding. And some of those MOUs could be a little bit more formal, and organizations may shy away from that. I think a lot of us can appreciate that rotating staff can impact continuity. And that also makes it hard to kind of create diversity in our partnership group. So trying to like see what we can do to kind of minimize that rotating staff issue as well. And then finally, navigating, personalities, egos. Are you trying to work with a specific person, or are you trying to work with an organization? So trying to figure that out, I think, is important. When you're in the field, another thing that we've been finding is that the field season can be really limiting as well. We've seen a lot of air quality alerts, lightning and weather kind of issues, and some of those days just really can't be rescheduled. And so we all have limited field days, and some of these species, have a limited time to get work done. Trying to minimize the paperwork, management, making it easy. And finally, moving from concepts to actual goals is very challenging. And that could be difficult to navigate. So trying to having someone who's good at kind of getting you over that initial hard part of going from concept to actual action. And then recognizing, I think this alludes to another comment that I made before, that invasive species may not actually be the #1 priority. So trying to balance how invasive species fits into your partnership group, I think is important as well. But once you are we're all doing good work, and I think it's important that we promote what we do. I think it's important to also kind of build, turn some of these partnerships into professional friendships. And then, utilizing things like social media can go a long way. And when you do end of year reports or posts, giving those shout outs, people will see, some of the good work that you're doing, and they may get inspired to join you, being like, hey, I want to be a part of that as well. So I wouldn't discount the importance of social media and, public celebratory efforts as well. And while we can't say yes to everything due to limited capacity, we want to know things like, will our efforts contribute to your success? What will this partnership look like in about 3 years, or right now, or 10 years? And does what we do complement, the plans and goals? It's a two-way thing. Are we going to be, required to attend partner meetings and so on? Or are people, wanting us to help them, but are they going to be a good partner in return? We also do a lot of our grant work planning months out. And so quite often we get a lot of folks, contacting us just when a grant has been released saying, hey, we want help. And, but we don't know who they are. We've never worked with them. We don't have any common links. And so it gets really difficult, especially when we've already allocated our resources and things in that nature. So working with people before to establish a relationship, I think, is really important. And so we do take a fellowship approach to everything that we do. And I want to show some highlights. We have been working with stiltgrass at Watkins Lake State Park and County Preserve. This is a grass, it's kind of invaded a decent part of Washtenaw County. And we've been working with the county folks. I want to give a shout out to Allison. It's a jointly managed area, and we've been doing management and education and outreach in that area, and we're seeing great results. And so what this partnership looks like is that we do a lot of training in the community. There's a lot of joint efforts to mail postcards, share some of that burden, writing grants to get full and partial treatments. And, also including our state partners as well for surveying. We also, Jackson Audubon, it's a little bit different. They do a lot of work with a lot of partners. So we feel that even though we do have a small part in this, we are collectively adding to the big benefits that they are putting to their land. And so for this one, we are essentially just helping partner with work days. So we are committed to 2 work days, pulling garlic mustard in May and spotted knapweed in August. And then finally, the third example that I want to share is, working with the Nature Conservancy and the Master Gardeners. This is more of a restoration and survey help. So we do a lot of training, say, hey, here's some invasive species we want people to keep an eye out for. We do the kind of organizing aspect of it. TNC gets increased capacity to actually like get those native seeds, and the master gardeners get some needed hours. So it's a win-win situation for everyone. So I believe I'm at my 15 minutes. So if anyone has any questions or concerns or anything about working with partnerships, I can take some questions now.
Thank you so much, Shika. Just looking into the question period.
This is
So
almost like, a checklist, so to speak. So even if there aren't any questions, I think this is also kind of like a mindful exercise to kind of go through as we work with people and, create like how we want to approach partnership. And we want a robust partnership as well.
so I have a question. Throughout your work, what are some of the most challenging aspects and some of the most rewarding aspects of your work that you've found so far?
Yeah, so challenging, I would definitely say is the capacity issue. So we have like a small staff in our office, ranges like 5 people, but I'm the actual only full-time person who's doing the invasive species work on the JLW SISMA. And so capacity is an issue, trying to be pulled, working in 3 different counties can be challenging because, it's hard to kind of build, some of these strong relationships when, your time is divided, amongst 3 different places. And as far as the rewarding aspect is like, we get to visit and, do amazing work on different properties. We don't own any property ourselves, but this is an opportunity for us to help support other local efforts. And we get a lot of requests from people who are not familiar with invasive species, and so they really need some help in identifying species and then how to remove and manage. So we're happy to help in that aspect as well. So we really are using our grant funding to help and increase capacity in the community, so those partners can actually get really good work done, and they can in turn increase community capacity to their own partnership and their other groups as well.
Thank you so much for that, Shika. And your contact information is there available for anyone if they think of anything else to contact you. And I'll move along now then to our next speaker. So we have Mathis Tessier. The title of his presentation is Enhancing Voter Engagement to Prevent the Spread of Aquatic Invasive Species, Lessons from 4 Years of Outreach in Quebec. So I'll hand it over to our speaker now.
Hi. Can you confirm you're seeing my screen correctly, Adam? Yeah.
Yep,
Great.
absolutely.
Okay. So, like Adam said, I'm Mathis Tessier from O0 Solutions, a company based in Quebec. So, over the past 4 years, a collaborative partnership between Fisheries and Oceans Canada, DFO, watershed organizations, and outreach teams has conducted extensive field engagement with recreational boaters across Eastern Canada. Through 236 outreach events, we've gathered critical data about boater behaviors and habits. This presentation shares what we've learned about effective community engagement, the realities of clean, drain, dry adoption, and the power of consistent, repeated messaging in building lasting behavioral change. The recreational boating community represents both our greatest challenge and our strongest ally in preventing the spread of aquatic invasive species. Understanding their habits and addressing their concerns has provided invaluable insights into what works, what doesn't, and where we need to focus our efforts moving forwards. Let's start by understanding aquatic invasives and their impacts. Aquatic invasive species, or AIS, alter the ecosystems they invade, reduce biodiversity, and impact native species that have evolved in these waters. The economic cost of aquatic invasive species in Canada is staggering. Current estimates suggest AIS costs the Canadian economy up to $7 billion dollars annually across all sectors. Municipalities and conservation authorities face significant ongoing expenses for invasive species management. The cost of managing AIS is 100 times more than preventing it. That means that each dollar invested in prevention will save up to 100 in control. For lakefront property owners, the presence of invasive species directly impacts property value, up to 20% lost. AIS also affects quality of life. Dense milfoil beds make swimming impossible. Zebra mussel shells create hazardous conditions alongside beaches, and the overall degradation of water quality diminishes the very attributes that make waterfront living desirable. Beyond dollars and ecosystems, aquatic invasive species affect the social fabric of communities built around healthy lakes and rivers. Recreational activities like fishing, swimming, boating, and paddleboarding become compromised or impossible when invasive species take hold. Recreational borders present recreational borders represent the single most important vector for the spread of freshwater AIS. This pathway occurs through three primary mechanisms, so external attachments, adult organisms, plant fragments, and other species attached to boat hulls, trailers, and equipments. Equipment entanglement, so invasive plants become entangled in motors, propellers, anchor lines, fishing gears, and trailer rollers. These plant fragments can also contain attached invisible animals. They can survive for several days if kept moist during transport between water bodies. And lastly, we have residual water, so internal components like live wells, ballast tanks, bilges, cooling systems, and jet propulsion units that retain water which can contain invasive species. This represents one of the highest risk pathways because it's invisible and often overlooked. Water can remain in the system for extended periods. An organism can survive up to 27 days, depending on temperature and species. So our approach is community-based outreach events. Our outreach program relies on collaboration with watershed organizations, the Organismes de Bassin Versant or OBVs. These local experts understand their territories much better and have established relationships with municipalities and communities. These partnerships allow us to leverage local knowledge, build trust within communities, and ensure our messaging aligns with regional priorities. Planning begins early of March each year. We organize events as regional tours and that are typically from Thursday to Sunday, visiting between 4 and 7 different water bodies each weekend. This concentrated approach maximizes efficiency for us. The timing targets peak boating activity, early season boat launches, holiday weekends, and popular fishing periods. Each outreach event includes 4 integrated components. Sorry about that. So mobile washing station demonstrations. We demonstrate proper boat decontamination using an O0 mobile washing equipment for both high pressure external cleaning and low pressure internal system flushing. We do community education, so we engage in conversations about AI's biology, impacts, and spreading vectors. We have visual aids, specimens, and local examples that make these concepts more tangible. We do equipment tours, so walking boaters through our equipment helps demystify the decontamination process and address common concerns about damage to boats. We explain why 60-degree water temperature is critical and why 2,600 psi pressure is necessary for external cleaning, and how we adjust techniques for different boat types. We then do Q&As, so this informal dialogue often reveals the most interesting insights. Boaters share their concerns, misconceptions, and practical barriers to compliance. These conversations help to better our approach and refine messaging for maximum effectiveness. We also provide free boat washing, which removes the significant barrier to adoption. While permanent washing stations may charge fees to cover operational costs, our outreach events demonstrate best practices at no cost to boaters. This increases the participation and ensures that economic barriers don't prevent people from learning proper decontamination techniques. From 2022 through 2025, we've conducted 236 outreach events across 167 different water bodies in Eastern Canada. These events resulted in 1,401 boats watched and inspected, 3,372 individuals educated about AIS prevention, and coverage across 4 provinces in Canada, so Ontario, Quebec, Nova Scotia, and New Brunswick. Understanding what types of boats are on our waters helps with risk assessment and prevention strategies. So our data revealed that 51% are complex boats. So these vessels feature multiple motors, internal water systems, enclosed compartments, and sophisticated components. They present the highest risk of AIS transport. 29% are simple boats, open-hull vessels with single outboard motors and minimal internal systems, which represent moderate risk. And 20% are non-motorized boats, like canoes, kayaks, paddleboards, and similar watercrafts, would represent the lowest individual risk. How many lakes and rivers do boaters visit in a typical season? This question is critical because multi-site visitors create the connection through which AIS spread. Field engagement reveals important patterns. So single-site users dominate with 51% of boaters that report staying in one water body throughout the season. This is encouraging for us from a prevention standpoint, as these boaters create no interlake connections, and multi-site visitors are still common. So the other 49% of all boaters visit multiple water bodies. 36% visit between 2 and 5 water bodies per season, 3% visits between 6 and 10, and 2% visits more than 10 water bodies. We also have high-risk, high-mobility boaters that exist. So 14% of all boaters who were surveyed are complex boat users that visit more than one lake each year. For non-motorized boats, 52% of owners visit more than one site annually. Even though non-motorized boats represent low per-trip risk, high visitation frequencies create multiple opportunities for spreading AIS. Understanding what boaters do on the water helps tailor messaging to specific user groups. So fishing remains predominant. 46% of boaters mention fishing as an activity, either alone or combined with other pursuits. We then have recreation and relaxation. So 35% of respondents indicated recreation, relaxation, and nature observation as their primary activity. And water sports only represent 3% that mention water skiing or wakeboarding specifically, though this may be underrepresented given that these activities are often done on complex boats that are docked all summer. The other 16% have not specified their activity in our survey. When we ask boaters about their cleaning practices, we encounter the gap between intention and effective decontamination action. Self-reported compliance appears very high. So 82% of boaters we surveyed claimed they cleaned their boats when moving between water bodies. So if we break this down further, 60% said that they always clean, 19% said that they sometimes clean, 3% said that they clean only when mandatory, and 13% said that they never clean, aka the only group we can confidently assess as non-compliant. Patterns correlate with risk awareness. Boaters with more complex boats reported higher cleaning rates, so 86% versus 85% for simple boats and 70% for non-motorized. Similarly, those visiting more sites reported higher compliance, approaching 100% for those visiting more than 10 water bodies annually. This suggests that education about risk does influence behavior, at least at the level of intention. The critical nuance we want to bring is, what does cleaning mean? This is where our field observations diverge sharply from survey responses. When boaters say they clean their boats, they often mean a quick rinse with garden hose using cold water, shining their boats, removing visible debris or plant material, draining live wells but not other internal systems, and allowing boats to air dry for a few hours. What they typically do not mean is hot water decontamination at 60 degrees or higher, high pressure washing at 2600 psi to remove attached organisms, and flushing all internal water systems, adjusting drying time based on weather and humidity, and inspection and cleaning of trailer components, anchor lines, and all equipment. Our field observations revealed that draining, the most critical component of clean drain dry, is the most overlooked steps. Many boaters don't realize their boats retain water in multiple hidden compartments. Without complete drainage, the clean drain dry process is an incomplete, regardless of how thoroughly the exterior is washed. A pull the plug initiative is a great way to help boaters drain their boats. Cold water simply does not kill species in general. Hot water decontamination at 60 degrees is effective precisely because it achieves thermal mortality. When boaters wash with cold water, they're moving organisms, not killing them. I want to specify here that removing AIS from a boat is still helpful, so a cold rinse is still better than nothing. Boaters often focus on removing visible plant material and debris, which is great. However, some high-risk AIs are too small to see, like zebra mussel villagers, plant fragments, or microscopic organisms. Effective decontamination addresses both visible and invisible threats. Given these realities, we must critically evaluate the true compliance rate. While 82% of boaters report cleaning, our estimate based on on-field observations suggests that maybe around 20% actually achieve effective decontamination that meaningfully reduces AIS spread risk. The remainder perform actions that do not really help in preventing the spread of AIS. This gap between perceived and actual compliance represents our greatest opportunity. Boaters want to do the right thing. The high self-reported cleaning rates demonstrate that. The problem lies in the lack of knowledge about what cleaning your boat actually means. This is exactly what our outreach events address. One of the most important findings didn't emerge from survey data, but from direct experience at sites we visited multiple years in a row. We observed a clear pattern. Information takes root through repetition. At sites we visited for the first time, conversation often begin with basic awareness building. What are aquatic invasive species? Why should I care? What's the actual risk? By the second year at the same location, baseline knowledge had increased noticeably. Boaters referred to what you told us last year and asked more sophisticated questions about specific protocols or local invasion risk. By the third visit, we observed behavioral changes. More asked specifically about internal system flushing, more reported adopting at least some decontamination practices at home. This progression didn't happen because our messages changed. We delivered consistent information each year. It happened because hearing the same message repeatedly from multiple trusted sources enhances engagement and behavioral change. Critically, this repetition effect strengthens dramatically when multiple actors deliver consistent messages. This is why we partner with watershed organizations and governments. We provide intensive seasonal engagement, while local governments and agencies maintain year-round presence and messaging. Behavioral change research consistently demonstrates that social norms powerfully influence individual actions. Creating this social norm requires years of consistent messaging. A single outreach event is the start to something. Annual repetition allows the idea to grow into established community practices. We also observed that local watershed organization representatives often achieve deeper engagement than other agencies. People trust their neighbors and community organizations. When local representative explains the threat to their shared lake, it speaks differently than when it comes from an outsider. So if we want to finish with lessons learned and critical gaps to address, what we really learn is that meeting boaters where they are is key. Conducting outreach events at boat launches during peak activity time ensures engagement with active boaters. Showing someone how to clean their boats while they're preparing to launch is more effective than generic signage. Removing economic barriers through free boat washing increases participation as well. Showing boaters the inside of our washing equipment, walking them through the process and letting them ask questions while we demonstrate techniques create lasting understanding. Local agencies provide credibility, community connections, and year-round presence that visiting partners cannot match. And single contacts create awareness. Repeated annual engagement creates behavioral change. Finally, the critical gaps to address. Most boarders understand clean and have some concept of dry, but drain remains poorly understood. We need education about where water hides in different vessel configurations and how to drain and flush efficiently all compartments. Even highly motivated boarders struggle to achieve effective decontamination at home without proper equipment. Expanding access to washing stations represent critical infrastructure investment. Then there's the cold water delusion. Many boarders believe that thorough rinsing with cold water is enough. Clear communication about thermal mortality requirements and the biological basis for 60-degree water temperature could change this misconception. And finally, ensuring consistent information across DFO, provincial agencies, watershed organizations, and municipalities prevent confusion, strengthens the repetition effects. So regular coordination meetings and shared educational resources could support this alignment to make the clean, drain, dry message universal. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. I will also stay in the webinar, so if you have any questions that pops up, you can ask them in the chat and I'll reply by text as well in the next hour or so.
Thank you so much, Matisse. There's a couple of questions we have in the Q&A here. One of them is related to the data. How many voters were surveyed over what time period?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we have approximately between, I don't remember exactly, but it's between 700 and 1,000 surveyed, and they were surveyed between 2023 and 2025. So yeah, for 2 summers.
Thank you
3
very
summers,
much.
sorry.
Sorry. The next question is, how is the 20% actual compliance estimated?
Yeah, so we O0 is the team that goes on site. So it's based on insight when we discuss with people, and it's not 20% that actually attain full decontamination procedures. It's 20% of people that attain a, a certain form of effectiveness that actually reduce in some way risk for AIS, but it's nearly 0% that attain full decontamination at home, and it is estimated based on what we discuss with people.
Thank you very much. There's one last question here. Sorry, there's a couple more questions. One of them is someone apologizes for missing the beginning of the presentation. As an avid paddleboarder, were you able to consider or have the capacity to include watercrafts such as canoes and paddleboards and kayaks?
Yeah, like I mentioned, like 20% of all surveyed people had non-motorized boats, so like canoes, kayaks, and paddleboards. So yeah, they are included in all the data that I shared.
Thank you. One of them is, what is the biggest psychological barrier you're seeing, not knowing about hidden water, time pressure at ramp, fear of boating damage, or skepticism that cold water rinsing is insufficient? And how are you tailoring your messaging to that barrier?
Yeah, that's a great question actually. So the biggest barrier I saw personally on field is time. People say they don't have time to do it. Like boaters, they arrive at boat washing stations and they argue that it's time consuming. So what I really like to do is I got pretty good at this given years that I'm on site, but I try to size what kind of people I have in front of me and to adapt what impacts of AIS I discuss with them. So if I have someone that is living alongside that said water bodies, then I will discuss about lakefront property, housing that can diminish in value. If I talk to someone who works for a municipality, I can discuss about the cost of managing an AIS. If I talk with a fisherman, then I mention the biological impacts that AIS have on species population. So I try to really adjust my messaging to to leave the most impact on the person that I have in front of me to make them understand why AIS are a threat and why they need to watch their boats.
Thank you. There are a couple more questions. However, we've ran out of time for this session. I would like to direct those individuals to ask the question to Matisse directly, who has already expressed the desire to stick around in the chat after and answer some questions if anyone has any for.
Yeah, I will make sure to look at the chat and reply with text. And if you have any other questions or messages, feel free to reach out by email.
Thank you so much, Matisse.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Adam, and thanks to all of our speakers. That was a really great session. We'll break for lunch now, so feel free to check out our virtual expo. We'll see you all back here for the keynote session at 12:30, where Dia Lorance will be talking about anticipating biological invasions through threat forecasting and eye ecology. Hope to see you all there.